Hello, welcome to Skye Sweaty Record Review, the only new music review show hosted by a French professor who's all sweaty after going to the gym. So this week, it's Saturday, so all the new music came out yesterday, and I was looking through the list on Tidal of all the new music, and the top two most featured, most important releases this week are both compilations. One is the soundtrack to Bohemian Rhapsody, a movie which I am looking forward to, but I know I'm going to be disappointed by, and a compilation greatest hits of Major Lazer, who's sort of like one of the most important transnational pop reggae hybrid bands out there. And that kind of made me sad, because compilations are usually the sign of artistic death, like reunion tours and greatest hits. It's just a sign that there's no more creativity there, no more experimenting going on. So I said, forget that, let's get experimental. And I went through the list, and the first thing I saw was Yoko Ono, and I said, oh no, I'll maybe listen to her. And I kept going, and I found another record, and I decided that these two go pretty well together. Dead Rider Trio, featuring Paul Williams, and Yoko Ono's album Warzone. Basically, this is an example of two old people, all right? People who are old, all right? I think in their 70s or their 80s. And they're staying relevant. And they're staying relevant by staying experimental, by trying new things. Kind of the opposite of a greatest hits record. So I want to start with Dead Rider because that's what I prefer of the two things I listened to this week. And I am really excited about this group. All I know about them, I read in their bio on Tidal, is they're an experimental group out of Chicago. Fine, Chicago makes good music. But this record, it's just great. It's this Dead Rider trio, so it's three of the members, drum, bass, guitar, and they make some of my favorite style of rock and roll. It's very jarring, very dissonant. It sounds often like they don't know what they're doing, like they're just clanging randomly, but they're completely in sync, and everything is very intentional. It's kind of a jam, but not really. It really feels like, I don't know. It's exactly the kind of music I was trying to make when I made music 20 years ago and I was in a trio. I don't think I was a good enough drummer to keep the trio together. Sorry, guys. But it's this real, like, pushing music forward, not relying on chords or riffs or solos, but just three musicians who work completely together, who also sound like they're pushing the limits of listenability. So it's just excellent. The background is excellent. But then on top of it is all Paul Williams. If you don't know Paul Williams, you do know Paul Williams. So he wrote Rainbow Connection. He wrote We've Only Just Begun. I think he wrote most of the songs off the original A Star Is Born album. He also wrote, which is pretty much an unforgivable sin, he wrote the theme to Love Boat, which is my least favorite song. And he also wrote a song, or was featured on a song, on Daft Punk's Random Access Memories. And that's the song Touch, which is the only song my kids make me skip whenever we listen to it. It's the most experimental one. I think it's a wonderful song, but that's how I mainly know Paul Williams. And so I was interested to hear, what was this going to be? Was this going to be like Touch? Was this going to be like Rainbow Connection? It's not like any of that. It's basically a spoken word album. Okay, let me do my thing where I give you one track and then I tell you how that represents everything. The exemplary track is called Not a Point on a Scale. Already super long title that's not said in there. It starts off, and basically the first half or first 2/3 is this amazing poetry by Paul Williams. It's kind of angry, it's a little bit funny, it's a little bit crazy. It'll kind of make you go mad a little bit from time to time because you get this, and then he's sort of like talking this like super intense voices, and he's saying all these things, and it kind of gets inside your head. I think this would be a great record to listen to, like if you're feeling kind of weird on a late night and you're sort of walking through a city and you want a little bit of extra, I don't know, aggression or adrenaline. But, it has this great poetry. The first line of this song is, we're transforming the ogre here into something pleasing here. No, wait, I said that wrong. We are transforming the ogre into something. Pleasing here. So, like, and then he goes on to speak. And that's a lot of the theme of this record, is just this kind of interesting, disjointed poetry that sounds like stream of consciousness. It sounds random and improvised, but it's not. And that echoes the music, which makes this an extremely listenable album. This may actually be my favorite album I've listened to of all the ones I've listened to over the last couple months. In particular, that song is just excellent. There's a political song that's not pedantic at all, and I don't even know if it's really political. I think it is. It's called Glistening Sap on Leaves. He's just like growling this poem. It sounds kind of like... almost like William S. Burroughs. He used to do these he did this one album that's like a hip hop album with Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy back in the late 90s. And it kind of sounds like that. Like this old guy who doesn't quite know what the people are doing underneath him, but he's just going with it. And it works really well. And as a tagline to this, he just keeps on saying, but it's funny. And that's, I believe, his political statement. You know, like he's talking about all these things, you know, like they're showing outward hostility, but it's funny. Just an excellent track. He sings only a little tiny bit on one song called The Inching Thief. There's very little synthesized elements just on one song, a song called For the Daughters of Rope Makers. I don't know. There's just like a synthesized element of 2 notes. And then it ends on another amazing, amazing track. The very last lines of the entire album are him saying, bring the audience into the piece, and then we are done. And then they take the we are done and repeat it till it kind of goes on to infinity. And then there's this kind of weird semi-funk distortion jam that ends out the album. It's awesome. Excellent, excellent record. Now, another great line from this is one of the first lines, bring me clean linen and clean off the dead skin. So I'd say Paul Williams is alive and well. And this band, the Dead Riders Trio, is excellent. Some of the best musicianship I've heard in a long time. And exactly the kind of music I like. So Paul Williams is alive. This is my attempt at a segue. And so is Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono lets you know that she's alive on the only truly experimental art track on her album, Warzone. Not Warhorse. That's a movie. On a song called I'm Alive. And that's just a song where she says I'm alive and like bangs on the table. And that's what I expected the whole album to be like. But really it's not that. I've never listened to Yoko Ono. I've never intentionally listened to Yoko Ono. I've always kind of thought she was funny, and you know, that clip with her and Chuck Berry and John Lennon is truly one of the funniest things on YouTube. If you've never seen it, it's amazing. I've always felt that she was mistreated. I sort of feel like the baby boomers took out all of their anger about the end of the 60s on her. I don't know. But, you know, she's an artist, and that's one thing I've always respected about her, is she's remained an artist. And so I listened to this album, and I would say that there's, as there is often with the things I review, the good and the bad. I mean, she's a remarkably honest, sincere, very, very, very earnest person. You know, she doesn't hide anything. There's very little irony. Even though she's an artist and she's famous for being weird and all that, she's really earnest. So the bad side of that is like in a song called Now or Never. And she literally says, and I'm not joking here, people of America, when will we stop? It's just like, ah. Like, I don't mind the screaming, ah, that's fine, but lyrics that bad are difficult. But the other side is also here. Like there's another very political song that kind of echoes that, but it's just called Why. And it's her screaming why for a few minutes. And to me, that's what I want to listen to when I listen to Yoko Ono. I don't mind the screaming. That's what she does. So she can have a song like Warzone, which is super pedantic and kind of bad rapping and talking about that. But that's less interesting. And fortunately, that's the minority of the album. For the most part, it's her more avant-garde side. Musically, it's pretty agreeable, nothing too dissonant. I think she had a lot of good collaborators who just make a pretty simple sound bed for her. A song, I'd say the best track on the album is probably a song called Hell in Paradise, where she's talking about, I think, the difficulty of her life and in America. She has a nice song called Woman Power, which I was afraid would be too pedantic, but is not. It's like a track about human dignity. It ends with strings. It's well produced. It has a companion piece, which is Children Power, which is like this lullaby. There's like a couple lullaby songs on here that feel like they're written for children or grandchildren. Children Power and I Love You Earth, which is literally a love song to the earth, which sounds like the worst thing, but it's actually an okay song. Another song is this awkward track called I Love All of Me, which, it's just a song about empowerment and loving yourself, even if you're fat or skinny or black or white. And that's everything about that sounds bad, but it's actually a really sweet song. And at least for me, the earnestness cut through, and I find myself legitimately emotionally moved by something which objectively is really cheesy. It ends with her version of Imagine. So Imagine is one of the most overplayed songs in the universe. It's almost impossible to listen to. Part of me feels like she's getting near the end, and she knows that if she dies with this album, that's what everyone will play. I don't know. I imagine it will. You can call that a prediction. But it's great. I mean, the song Imagine, objectively, is a good song. It's just overplayed. But she turns it into like this funeral dirge with just very sparse like organ playing as opposed to piano. Piano comes in a little bit later. It's kind of like an avant-garde version of the song Imagine. And I think it regains a little bit of its punch, because the song is essentially anti-religion, anti-government, anti-capitalist. And I think it regains it a little bit with Yoko Ono's voice. So there you go. There's the two records I reviewed for today, Dead Rider and Yoko Ono. Music is alive. These Paul Williams and Yoko Ono are alive. There's a lot more out there than just compilations and rehashing the same 10 stories over and over again. And I'll catch you on the next Skye Sweaty record review. I'm adding the thing about the random thing I see written on the news. And it was on Fox, and it said, "The impact of women in 2018. Which is kind of an interesting poetic statement. Oh, and the answer to the trivia question, which I will now write, Count Chocula.